My name is Neha Gupta, and I want to actually start with a land acknowledgement that will situate me and my relationship to what I do and really what we're doing here today. So this is a photograph of Okanagan Lake in Kelowna, where the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus is located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Syilx Okanagan people. Through these acknowledgements, I recognize that I benefit financially from working in a colonial institution and from privileges that accompany my position. This also means that I call out colonial practices and support actions that redress such policies, processes, and practices both within the university but also beyond it. So before I really introduce today's event, I would ask that we take a moment of silence together for the victims of Saturday's violent attack at the Lapu Lapu Day Festival in Vancouver, and to show our steadfast support for the victims' families and their friends. So for those of us who are local, there is a vigil this evening at the Ben Lee Park. So please feel free to take some candles, white flowers, if you're able to do so after our event. So I am an assistant professor in anthropology at UBC. I'm also director of the DARE Lab and a partner in today's event, which is called, the full title being, In the Arc of Justice, Opening Space for Anti-Racist and Anti-Casteist Narratives with and alongside South Asian communities in the Okanagan and the Lower Mainland. This event is funded by the Community University Engagement Support Program at the University of British Columbia. This program supports partnerships between community organizations and university students, staff, and faculty, really by removing financial barriers and prioritizing reciprocal, inclusive engagement so that all communities, especially those that have been and continue to be underserved, marginalized, or excluded, can benefit. It's enabled me to work with Anita and Dr. Sandhra to bring our energies together to organize events that raise awareness about the intersectional experience of race and caste in workspaces, in educational and social spaces, and really to promote that reciprocal learning through a public talk with our distinguished speaker, Dr. Jangam, and OVERCASTE, this powerful traveling exhibit that Anita and Dr. Sandhra will tell us about shortly. Our aim through this work is really to create and hold space to listen, to learn, and speak about our experience of race and caste-based discrimination in British Columbia, and in turn support South Asian communities in mitigating harms, in empowering youth and young professionals in telling their stories, and to promote advocacy in the building of a Desi Canadian Museum in BC. So we're delighted that you are part of this conversation and part of this journey. So with this, I'll ask Anita and Dr. Sandhra to come up and tell us a little bit about OVERCASTE.
Hello, everybody. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and Jai Bhim to everybody. Thank you, Neha, for the lovely words and introduction, and thank you, everybody, for coming here today. So I'm supposed to tell my story about OVERCASTE, and you'll learn more about it as we talk later on. But so I'm born and raised in Canada. I'm Punjabi Sikh, and I'm Dalit. My family has been settlers on this land since 1906. So as you can tell, we have many generations that have been born and raised here. And so I've been doing community work for about 10 years, 10, 15 years, if not more. I'm not going to age myself too much. But in the work, I noticed the fact that there wasn't any work that was being done when it came down to caste. Anti-caste work, caste discrimination, from a diasporic lens, and especially happening within Punjabi Sikh communities. So when conversations about this started coming up, everybody's question was always like, but how does caste show up in Canada? Like how? Where does it fit in? And within our communities, we had normalized it so much, right, that it was just accepted. We didn't talk about it publicly. We knew that if you're a certain caste, you're not going to be accepted in a relationship somewhere else, right? We know that Punjabi music, 90% is casteist. But it was okay because there was this equivalent between Punjabi Jat, which is a caste culture, and how we were born and raised here. So this exhibit came about to answer that question. And when you read through it and you hear the narratives, these are all majority of kids that are born and raised in Canada, right? So these aren't newcomers. These aren't international students who are bringing over their stuff from their country. These are people that are born and raised here. They're Canadians, and therefore this is a Canadian problem because it's continuing to happen here. So that's how this came across. These stories are of young Canadian Dalits, mostly from the Punjabi Sikh community, telling you this is where caste shows up. This is where I've felt it. So we were really excited too because what it gave a chance to was for young people to tell their story, right? To like mobilize them, to give them tools to talk about it, to bring it up, and then to empower them. And in another great thing about this exhibit that I'm really proud of, two things, was the team that we had working on it. So we had a very diverse team. We had a team that was actually majority Dalit youth, which is really hard to find, working on this. True, some of them were my relatives, and they'd get in trouble if they weren't. We had people from the trans community. We had people that were from academia. We had people that were from caste privilege backgrounds, right? So it was a real great. So I want to thank the original team. Just mention them. Obviously, Sharan, who's my co-curator on this, Mo Dhaliwal, who is the strategist and co-founder, Jesse Sopal, who is a young artist and is of Dalit background, Sean Dhaliwal, Dr. Sasha Sabharwal, Manmeet Singh, Sarah Kanwal, Meena Hira, Jagreet Dadley, and Parveen Hira. And alongside, we also had a number of community partners that came in, and they are really significant, not just because we got support from them, they did cross-marketing, but the fact that they actually put their name behind anti-caste work, right? And this is huge, because remember, when we're calling people out about caste privilege, these are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are good people who are now having to do some introspection on how caste privilege has given them privilege within our social spaces. And so they're going to push back because, there's a fragility there. And yet when organizations have put their name behind this work, it's quite significant. I also want to acknowledge that this work can't be done in silos. So coming collectively together to do this work is important. But as we do, we also need to understand we're standing on unceded territories when truth and reconciliation is still a work in progress. There are still missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people across BC without justice. There are genocides happening in Sudan and Palestine, with warnings of genocide in India, Congo, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. In Canada, for many South Asian communities, there's constant danger from international interference, whether you're anti-caste movement, Sikh, queer, Kashmiri organizations, or any voice of resilience. We have seen that those voices aren't safe even here. So it's important for us to work together, to work collectively and collaboratively, because we're not free until all of us are free. Now I'll hand it over to Sharan.
Thanks, Anita. Yes, please clap for the amazing Anita. I'm not going to take too much of your time because I think we're all really looking forward to hearing Dr. Jangam speak, but I do want to just highlight the fact that caste-based work, caste-based conversation is fraught, even in Canada. It causes people to resist the dialogue. It causes people to become angry because the dialogue is happening. So forget even doing anti-caste work, even just raising awareness about caste-based discrimination, hierarchies, is a problem. And I think working with Anita for a few years now and our amazing team and creating this exhibit, I think what has shocked me the most is the sheer level of resistance that we continue to face. So this month is both Sikh Heritage Month, it's winding down, and Dalit History Month. Many people in Canada are aware of the fact that it's Sikh History Month because the Sikh community is such a vibrant, long-standing community in Canada, but very few people know it's Dalit History Month. And for me as a Sikh woman and as somebody who had an inter-caste marriage with somebody who was Dalit and was, resisted by my family members for it, the intersections of Sikh and Dalit History Month are my lived being. They are why I bring my children to every event that we do, so they embody these stories and experiences of being anti-caste. It is Sikh History Month and it is Dalit History Month, but as Sikhs, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of unlearning the caste-based discrimination that still exists in our communities, despite being a radical faith that from its foundation said, we will abolish caste, right? So the radical ideas that were brought forth in the 15th century continue to perpetuate today. That is the sheer force and power of caste-based discrimination that exists to this very day. And that is why small exhibits like this, the collection of stories that we have, shed light on those experiences. This exhibit, I'm so excited now, is going to be a traveling exhibit. So its simplicity in form is purposeful because we want to bring it all across Canada. We want it all across BC. We want it in Gurdwara spaces. We want it in, sacred spaces. We want it in academic spaces. We want it in libraries. We want it wherever where we can get it. Because people need to read these stories and understand that this is not an ancient issue. This is not an issue that is, like Anita said, being brought in. It's here, and it's always been here. So if you are interested in bringing Overcast into the spaces of influence that you have, please reach out to us. We would be honored to be able to share our stories with you in your spaces as well. I do want to quickly acknowledge the small team that came together here to bring Overcast traveling to UBC Okanagan. So Manmeet in the back, the lovely Gurnur, Sean, and then my boys, Galvin and Joven, who were surveying people about the South Asian Canadian Museum. Because even though we may think exhibits or museums don't matter to us, I hope this small exhibit is an example of the power of telling our own stories. And imagine an exhibit that is 10 times the scale, looking at caste, in as gorgeous a building like the Museum of Vancouver or, a large-scale museum. Those are the sorts of dreams that I want our communities to have because we have a right to tell these stories. So on that, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Chinnaiah Jangam. Dr. Jangam is an associate professor in the Department of History at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. He specializes in the social and intellectual history of Dalits in modern South Asia. He earned his MA in History from the University of Hyderabad, an MPhil in Modern Indian History from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and a PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, at the University of London. Dr. Jangam's personal journey is a testament to resilience and determination. Born in Telangana, India, he overcame significant socioeconomic challenges, including working as a child laborer and facing caste-based discrimination. Despite those obstacles, he pursued higher education, eventually earning advanced degrees and securing a professorship in Canada. His life story highlights the transformative power of education and serves as an inspiration for many. We are all extremely honored to have you here, Dr. Jangam, and look forward to hearing you. Thank you. Come.
Jai Bhim to you all, and happy Dalit History Month and happy Sikh Heritage Month. And I feel humbled to be here, and I'm very grateful to Anita, Sharan and Neha for inviting me. And I remember I was looking at my notes when we had our Zoom meeting on February 28th, what to expect and what to talk. And it's been really privileged, and I feel really happy that I was in collaboration with Anita and many other things, like when we are doing caste campaign related to TDSP board and other campaigns, and we were collaborating, and we only were talking over either Signal or Zoom. And this is the first time I had an opportunity to meet her, and and also to know about, particularly given Anita's history, our ancestors are one of the pioneers of Dalit presence in Canada. It's a special privilege, particularly to be here and know about our family and meet her in person. And now, being a Canadian, it's more important for me. And in this context, I was thinking about while coming to this talk, and I was also thinking about the many other forms of oppressions, particularly indigenous communities, and what is happening in Gaza now, and across the world, even in Kashmir and everywhere. And I think this is very important in terms of building solidarity between oppressed communities, and people face everyday forms of racism and various forms of oppressions. And I think this is a very significant event precisely because it's happening in a context in which we live. And the second thing is that reaching out, building solidarity in bridges between Sikh and Dalit communities, and in collaborating in terms of anti-caste network. And I think in that context, the exhibition itself is a very important testament for what kind of future we would like to build, both as Sikhs and also as Dalits and other oppressed communities. So I really feel, that way, it is a significant momentum for us, and, I will always remember this. And sorry, something happened. So before, so in that context, what I wanted to talk to you about is caste, community, and university spaces in Canada. I was telling Anita and others that I'm here for the last 15 years. And when I started my academic career, particularly in Canada, as a first Dalit academic, and one of the important challenges that at one level, South Asian diaspora is very powerful, both in academic spaces and also even in non-academic spaces. So in this context, when I started my journey, one of the important things about my experience of coming to North America, first I began my career as a postdoctoral fellow at New York University, and people used to look at me with lots of surprise that you also are here. And then they ask about my research, and I write on Dalits and all those things. So it was very surprising the way how much invisibility and stigma existed to be a Dalit in academic spaces. And then even in community gatherings also, like for example, I used to go to this, being a Telugu, I used to go to the Telugu gatherings in New York area. And the moment I tell my name, because I don't know how whether it happens in Sikh communities and North India or not, but in South India, particularly if you're coming from Telugu background, it's very easy to recognize person's caste by surname. You don't have to tell. Even my name gives out. Chinnaiah means, the moment they hear my name, they know that I come from Dalit background. And it was so, it came to such a situation that after a point I stopped going to any of these events. So in that context, what you see is that, caste, when I started my journey in 2005 as a postdoc fellow, and then moved in 2010 to coming to Canada and Carleton University, one of the important things I constantly experience is that, the whole idea of silence and erasure of caste question. And particularly in the context of North North American academia is that it's dominated by so-called post-colonial discourse, which actually thrives on this idea of anti-race scholarship and also anti-colonialism. So which basically dominated by the post-colonial scholarship, mostly what it tried to do is that, it tried to, present basically written by mostly by dominant caste, particularly Brahmins, both Bengali and Tamil and other upper caste Brahmins, who dominated the social science academia and even in sciences and other fields. What had happened that they completely invisibilized the caste. There was no discussion, acknowledgement of anti-caste movements and also caste-based oppression as a very important form of oppression in Indian history. So in this context, what had happened that these sort of invisibilization, what it did is that it made people like us, particularly people like me who have entered for the first time into North American academia, used to be very fearful. Before my tenure, I was very scared. And in that context, what you see is that this whole idea that fighting against racial oppression and also along with that caste oppression and caste-based discrimination was very important challenge for people like me. So in this context, what had happened that when I came here, one of the important things I started seeing is that the interconnection between race and caste. And how basically what we see is that many times the South Asian academia and also the most of the focus on race particularly used to separate race from the caste. And there was entire sociological anthropological inquiry, though there were early attempts by African Americans and others to show that recently also Isabel Wilkerson's book on caste, they tried to show that there is a connection. But what had happened that the South Asian academia particularly separated these two categories. But what you see is that in this context, caste and racial privilege, what they did is that they collaborated so well that caste completely delineated or disconnected from the idea of racial privilege. And if you really want to historically understand this problem, particularly as we are thinking in terms of indigenous racism and also the African American history and all sorts of things. One of the things happened to me, though I write on Dalits and I also started looking the longer history of caste. In fact, the present book I'm writing is on the history of caste, long duration history of caste, where I'm trying to look at history of caste from ancient period to all the way to modern period. One of the important argument I'm trying to make in my book is that caste is the foundation of Indian history, and in which basically throughout the history, 3,500 years of history, caste acted as a foundation for all civilizations to develop and also disappear. And if you look at ancient, medieval and modern times, across the periods you see that you see Buddhism came, Sikhism came, Jainism came, Islam came, Christianity came, but nothing displaced caste. What was displaced is political regimes, and each regime found caste as a very important collaborator of state power. Therefore, what happens is that even Buddhist kingdoms and Jain kingdoms, though they were anti-caste egalitarian religion like Sikhism, one of the important things is that the ruling elites always thought the caste is the efficient form of extraction of surplus, because caste-based labor is free and unpaid. That is the best way to make money. Capitalism thrives on that. So if you see, that's why what you see is that if you look at this, that is what I see, that if you look at the way in which Europeans, particularly in 15th century, beginning with Vasco da Gama, when they came into India, one of the important things they tried to see is that in the beginning they were very perplexed. The idea of caste itself comes from castas of Portuguese word. In the beginning they were very puzzled, but what had happened that they also saw the efficiency of the system. And therefore what you see is that the beginning of this whole obsession with Sanskrit and Brahmanism by the Europeans is a very interesting beginning in terms of how caste thinking was fundamental to the racial thinking. So therefore racial purity and caste purity collaborate so well. That's why wherever these Europeans started colonizing project, racialization projects, one of the important model for them was this caste as a very important thing. So in this context, what you see is that from 15th century to all the way to 18th century, means 1500 to 1700, and before the basically British were involved in Orientalist projects, it was actually Portuguese, German and French who are basically translating most of the texts, and particularly Jesuit missionaries. And they were the one who were taking all the Sanskrit texts into Europe and translating and also circulating. So therefore what you see is that you have this very interesting intellectual, epistemological foundations for the race which is coming from Indian subcontinent. So therefore, you cannot separate race from the caste. And it is actually, that's why if you look at enlightenment thinking, in fact I was I did 3-4 lectures in the last 3-4 years. Recently I was at the University of Toronto, and before that I was at UPenn and Atlanta. Everywhere I'm talking. Like, one of the important things I'm trying to argue is that race, caste becoming template for race. One of the important thing you see that enlightenment thinking. The European Enlightenment, we always think that it is based on the principle of equality and democracy, but actually that equality is based on racial thinking. Equality between white Christians only, not non-whites. So therefore what happens is that the humanity itself gets defined, and therefore one of the important things you see that the most of these people, particularly Enlightenment thinkers, particularly beginning from like French Renaissance thinkers, what you see is that they all use race as a very important template in defining the civilizations, and they all had this very important fatal attraction towards Sanskrit thinking and Sanskrit knowledge. And in that context, what happens is that they all valorized Brahmanism and Brahminical purity as the foundation for the European Enlightenment. So in this context, what you see is that like their involvement, particularly the Jesuits and afterwards the so-called secular intellectuals of Enlightenment era, what they did is that they used race as a very important foundation for thinking, caste as a foundation for thinking about racism. So therefore what we see, like today, the way in which you see like the embracement of Brahminical rituals or Brahminical ideas of life, particularly when it comes to the celebrations of of different festivals and yoga, for example, as a very important way in diaspora community, particularly the way it marketed both in North America and also Europe. And what you see is that it comes from this way in which basically the caste privilege and also racial privilege collaborated. And therefore what you see that when Indians migrated, particularly the caste privileged Indians to both to Europe and North America, one of the important things is that for them it is not much of a difference. Only challenge for them, change for them is geographical location. The caste privileged are like as privileged as white people. Like if you look at the stories of migration, you see that people who come to Canada, for example, people are fleeing civil wars, people are fleeing all kinds of problems in their home countries and trying to rebuild their lives. But caste privilege from India, what happens is that they come with engineering degrees, they come with doctorate degrees, some are doctors. Like I remember meeting 3 or 4 generations back, I met one lady whose great grandmother studied at the University of Pennsylvania MBBS. Can you imagine that sort of privilege? So in this context, what you see that the caste privilege, the way it migrated to North America is very, very different from any other migration stories. Like if you look at Syrian immigrants, or even for that matter, anyone from Latin America, they're literally running for their lives. That's not the case with South Asian immigrants. They're trying to make their lives better and they're coming with lots of privileges. So in this context, what happens is that, it is this privilege dominance, the way in which they presented their stories became the story of South Asia. So therefore what happens is that, in the construction of cultural life, and also presentation of diasporic life in North America, what you see is that the Brahmanism becomes the mainstream. Anything non-Brahmanical, anti-Brahmanical becomes inimical. So therefore, what you see is that what we face today in the context of Indian government and the way in which it is attacking both Dalits, Sikhs, and also Muslim minorities, comes from this context wherein which the caste privilege and Brahmanism, how they collaborate with power. Not just Indian state power, the power even in North America. You look at the way in which people both in Republican government and also Democratic government, you see all these same people having power. So in this context, what you see is that caste and race basically very collaborative in terms of what happens, and therefore what you see is that like Dalits basically, though they migrated in minuscule numbers, but what you see is that they always either try to hide themselves, passing, or otherwise they try to be more Brahmanical than the Brahmins. I see lots of Telugu Dalits. I go to this, who are making a lot of money as software engineers. They are like obsessed with Brahmanical rituals because they want to be accepted by other privileged people to be. So in this context, what happens is that either you overdo or otherwise you completely invisibilize. So in this context, what you see is that it is this. In this context, what happens is that the diasporic narrative in North America is always presented through the eyes or lens of the privileged caste people. So in this context, what you see is that you have this very interesting community, like a dominant community which actually dominates both in all spheres of life, and they are the one who are defining what kind of South Asian culture and also identity should exist. So in this context, when you come to the context of South Asian university spaces, again, that's another interesting thing. As I said, the way in which this whole idea of anti-colonial nationalism, particularly the Gandhi, I remember going to all the way to Midwest and going on a long taxi driver, white man, he doesn't know anything but he knows Gandhi. It's very interesting to see how basically the Gandhi has been presented as this poster boy of South Asia, India particularly. Wherever you go, both prime ministers and everyone, they think that that's the way to you buy the any sort of entry, that's what even in Carleton where I teach, when I joined in Carleton, one of the important things I saw that Gandhi statue of all the things. I'm like, I said, wow, who did it? All these basically caste privileged businessmen, they wanted to have an entry into the Carleton University community, and they presented a Gandhi statue to Carleton, and Carleton put it in the center of the university. And it's just interesting how basically this whole idea of, again, anti-race and basically anti-racial politics, and how the dominant caste tries to use that as a very important way to present themselves as this, yoga mats and, vegetarians and peace-loving people. This whole idea that Indians means peace, and they don't go for any sort of confrontations. But that's not what Hinduism is all about. The caste foundations are based on not only on exploitation but also violence. Caste will not exist without state violence. Even now, what happens is that the state is basically, the Indian state is a Brahmanical state, irrespective of the party. Even under Nehru also it was a Brahmanical state. The kind of things it has done, the kind of things particularly in terms of implementation of reservations, that's why what you see is that if you look at India now, caste privileged people are not under threat. Either it's BJP, Congress, or any sort of government, caste privileged Brahmins, they are in the boat. They can sail in any boat. You might know very interesting academic called Sanjay Subramaniam, who writes all these things about Hindu Muslims and how they collaborated in history and Mughal history, and he makes career. Sanjay Subramaniam writes so many secular histories, and his brother is the spokesperson of Modi, Jai Shankar. Jaish External Affairs Minister of India is a brother of Sanjay Subramaniam. I often tell people, I think both brothers at home when they meet, they might laugh at the world, right? Because they're fooling both ways. It's academic and also political. So that's what happens. That's what is called caste privilege is all about. Like we tear our clothes thinking that I am liberal and NDP, but for them it's same. It doesn't matter. So that's why it's very interesting to see how this whole idea that when you come to this whole idea of anti-colonial thinking, how it has been used by the dominant caste people to basically again present themselves as this very important model minority, both in America and in Canada, everywhere. So in this context, caste privilege becomes very important. So in that context, one of the important problems with this thing is that erasure of anti-caste movements. That's what till people like us came into academia and started talking about it, caste was never an issue. So in this context, what you see is that particularly in the context of 2014 elections in India and the rise of Hindu right and the way in which the anti-race and anti-caste reckoning, the post-George Floyd movement in America and also Rohit Vemula killing, particularly in University of Hyderabad, what it did is that it started setting a new kind of dialogue and soul searching, particularly in academic communities. So for the first time after 2016, I started seeing a sea change in the debates and also discussions in South Asian institutions and academia. So for the first time, South Asian academics, particularly caste privileged people, started acknowledging caste as a problem and started seeing as caste as a very important issue which has never been acknowledged. There is so much talk about racism, there is so much talk about indigenous oppression, residential schools in Canada, for example. You never see same open discussions about how caste is a foundation for oppression in South Asia. And now what happens is that this is a very important momentum, particularly another important reason why caste is suddenly taken center stage in the South Asian context is that they realize that the only way you can checkmate Hindu right is through the narrative of anti-casteism. That's why suddenly Ambedkar became an important icon and Pule became an important icon, because if you really want to challenge and also check Hindu right, morally challenge them, is caste. Caste is a very important thing where they don't have any answers for it. They cannot justify. Sitting in America, they cannot justify that inequality is good, right? I remember, this is what used to happen when I used to have the South Asia students. That's what, if you know anything about caste, they say that caste is like a division of labor. They say, everyone is doing their duties so that, there is no conflict in society. But I didn't choose my profession. That's what I tell them. If you look at, if I'm caste privileged, that's fine. But, I come from caste underprivileged background. And if I'm on the top, that's fine. Will you choose to be on the bottom? No, none of them will choose. So in this context, what happens is that, this caste privilege, the way in which it has been discussed and the way in which it is coming, in academic context, is very interesting. Another important thing you see that, social media. The independent social media, particularly the first generation or second generation of Dalit youth, have become very active. And in this context, what happens is that, the Dalit stories are, reaching everyone, and there is no way that they can stop this. So in this context, what you see is that another important thing is that, the Dalit feminism. That's another important voice, which actually challenging the mainstream privilege and mainstream, dominance. So in this context, and Dalit, queer and LGBT movement. So and the women's movement, particularly the second and third generation, are very, very important in terms of the way in which caste has been used, caste has been discussed, and also anti-caste ideas are being, very important part of discussions about South Asian social movements. And in this context, I think the diaspora is a very, very important in the sense, particularly, as I travel to many places in North America, one of the important thing I saw that, second and third generation, caste privileged, both girls and boys, in university campuses are very, very important, very, seriously thinking about it. Every time I go, at least, in fact, I'll tell you, very interesting, I was in Philadelphia as a visiting professor, and one day I went to Philadelphia Museum of Art. I was walking around the different exhibitions. I see two young women come to me running, and they suddenly come and ask me, "Are you Professor Jangam?" I'm like shocked. I said, "Oh my God, I lost all my privacy." I thought no one will recognize. So I said, "How do you know me?" They said, "We read your books, and in fact we are reading your Gabilam right now." And I'm like, I said, why are you interested in that? And then I asked about their privilege. They're Telugus and come from Brahmin backgrounds. And then they were telling me in the context of George Floyd events and how they thought about their own privilege and went and asked their parents. They said, there is no caste in India. And they learned themselves. So it's very interesting how second, third generation are coming to terms with what actually is happening. And that's a very important, promise we have. And I think, so in that context, and I think in the context of Canada, and so again, the great heritage of Anita, again, it starts with that. And, one of the important thing about, again, presence of Dalits in Canada, I think British Columbia is a very important and also pioneering province in terms of, Valmiki temples and the way in which Dalit presence exists here, and also in places like, again, Ontario and also Calgary and different places. So this Dalit migration, Dalit presence, one of the important thing is that, the post-90s and the recent developments is that, you see new immigrants, particularly both Ambedkar and Buddhists are coming. And this is what, when I started, the South Asian Dalit and Adivasi network in, founded in Ontario, one of the important things we wanted to do is that wherever we wanted to talk about caste, everyone is asking for evidence. How many Dalits are there? What actually, do you have any evidence of caste discrimination? And one of the things we are trying to do is that, have this, survey, caste survey in Canada. And now, right now we are doing in Ontario, and we have got 300,000 from Shark Grant, and we are trying to do it all over Canada. So in this context, what you see is that, there is a growing Dalit community across. And I think Canada, because given the liberal values and the way in which Canada's reception to both DA and also multiculturalism, and it's very important to see that, Dalit voice and Dalit presence makes a difference. And also, especially in building solidarity movements, both with indigenous people and also different communities across sections. And Jai Bhim again, thank you so much for your time.
I'll invite Dr. Gupta and Anita to join Dr. Jangam for a bit of a panel discussion with our amazing panelists. We don't have a ton of questions. There are just 3 questions. But I think this will help kind of bring together the amazing ideas that Dr. Jangam explained. Caste is a very complicated thing to be able to explain in a 20-25 minute talk, and I felt terrible shortening Dr. Jangam's talk because it's so fascinating, and I especially want to dissect and learn a little bit about caste in university spaces and what students experience as well. But I would like to ask a few questions from our panelists. The first question I would like to begin by asking is about awareness. So, at what point in your journey and life did you experience caste-based discrimination or become aware that it is something that exists here in the Canadian or Western diaspora? Anita, if I could ask you to begin, please.
Okay. So once again, everybody has very different stories, right? So I'm Dalit. My family is Dalit. I was born in a small town up north called Quesnel. But hung out with a very diverse crew of people. Moved to Abbotsford, which has a large Punjabi community, and I moved there when I was in high school. And I remember hanging out with, Punjabi kids, and so as Dr. Jangam was saying, last name is an identifier, right? But my last name is Lal. So Lal is usually a Hindu Brahmin last name. So now there's a whole history about Dalit people when they moved, changing their last names to hide their caste. And so when my dad actually came in the 70s, in the early 70s, our real last name is Marhas. And he changed it to Lal. One, it was hard, Marhas was hard to say, but really it was because of the caste factor. And so kids automatically assumed I was Brahmin, right? So, oh yeah, Lal. And then they also wanted to set me up with the Sharma that was in the school because he was also the only other Brahmin or like non-Punjabi Jat person in the school. But I went
We can
home.
never get like trying to like connect people out of our like system.
We can't.
Like let's just hook people
There
up.
has to be some connection. And they're also matchmaking in grade 9. And I was actually a little bit offended though because I didn't think he was cute. But anyways, that's a whole different story. But so I went home and asked my grandma, and I was like, oh, you know, BG, which means grandma. I'm like, are we Bummer? And she's looking at me like, no. But we were never raised with a caste lens in my house. Once again, okay, so another weird story. Like I was raised Jehovah's Witness for the first like 12 years of my life, right? So that's a whole different twist. But my grandma was sick, right? And she was like, no, you're not. She's like, where are you hearing this? I'm like, the kids at school. And she was like, look, we don't talk like that. We don't talk about that. You treat people with respect for who they are and how they show up. And if they don't treat you with respect, then you just walk away. And I was just like, that's a weird answer. Right? Like, I mean, what does that mean? But once again, people who are caste privileged show up with their caste. You know, they've been taught their caste their whole. And then people who are coming from caste oppressed backgrounds, so my grandma had a lot of trauma, were like, no, we don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. We're not going there. You're born and raised in Canada. And so at that point, I was like, okay, something's fishy and weird. And then as you kind of grew up, more and more stories. And then I realized, okay, yeah, we aren't up there. So as my brother said, you're down here. And what that kind of meant as you got older, different things started making more sense. That's my story.
Okay, Dr. Jangam.
Yes. Okay. I don't know where to begin. Yeah, because I was just telling Anita that, you know, when I was in University of Pennsylvania, I just I'm just writing a memoir of about my mother. And so I lost her when I was in grade 9 to snake bite. And so I come from I'm not just first generation, I'm also first generation in many, you know, relatives and many, you know, it's like when I came out of the village, I was like the one of the first to come out of the village to do undergraduation, and after that MA and going to PhD and also going to England, and everything is like, you know, it's a very shock, like, you know, for many people, me being alive itself is a surprise. You know, doing all these things is more shocking. So in this context, what happens is that, you know, for me, like it's not just an experience, it's an existence.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when I started my life going to school, I started as a bonded laborer. And the one of the important responsibility I had was I had to look after, used to clean cow dung in cow sheds of my landlords. They used to have 20 buffaloes, not cows. So 20 buffaloes, and I used to look after them, and particularly cleaning in the morning and evening, giving grass, everything. And I used to go beyond their children to school, send them to school as a kid. So that's how, you know, when I went and asked my mother that I also want to go to school. And then, you know, that was a new thing for my mother. How can you go? I said, you know, our landlord's children are going. And I should go. Then, you know, because my mother was a single mother and did not have a husband. And when I went to join in school, because I don't have a father, they don't give me admission. Because in India, you know, you have to give father's name to get admission. So he doesn't have father, how can he have? So that's another level of struggle, you know, gender, caste, and again, you know, escaping from that. And, you know, at every stage, like, you know, if you study well, they get surprised that, you know, how can you study well? And if you don't study well, they blame you that, you know, you come from that background. How can you expect you to study? So like, this is what, like, you know, for me, the caste, I lived with caste, and I lived, you know, it became part of my, that in fact, that made me to challenge. One of the, why I studied and why I wanted to prove myself every time is that, caste was always putting me, to challenges. Like, when I remember, when I was in JNU, in one of the best universities in India, and a friend of mine got a scholarship to go to Oxford. And she, after staying in Oxford for 1 year, she came for field work. And we were all mesmerized by her when she was telling about Oxford, friends and pubs in England, all those things. And she took us out for dinner and, with British pounds, right? So like after the dinner was over and everything, while we are coming back and the 4 or 5 of us are walking together, and I tell this Bengali Brahmin friend of mine, Pratik, I also want to go to England, I said. Then he just laughed, he burst out. There is no reservation to go to England, he said. That's like collapse of my world. And then, I thought, oh really, why should I need reservation? Then that's when I determined that I must go to England to prove. And before him, I reached England. So this is what it's like every time, like caste, what it does is that, it puts you so low, and it's always important for you to raise beyond the expectations of the others. And in fact, it comes to such a situation, like even in Canada, this is happening in 2023, I think. My wife also happens to be an academic. She also teaches in Carleton. And she had a PhD student. And she was on a committee of this PhD student, and she was Turkish student. And my wife and another South Asian academic, and 3 of them are in the same committee. And it seems this PhD student went to talk to this another Indian, Punjabi, Brahmin academic, about her work. While talking, it seems my wife is a Bengali Brahmin, and this Indian academic told this Turkish PhD student, I don't know why Mayurika married this guy. She went beneath her social ladder to marry this guy. This is happening in 2023. I am an associate professor, chair of University Grievance Committee. So caste exists everywhere.
When Dr. Jangam talks, I just feel like I want to be in like a poetry slam and just like snap or like give affirmations, because I can't sit silently when Dr. Jangam shares what he has to share.
So I can talk, this is like...
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for me, not like that's the reason why I'm writing a memoir. Because I don't want to write these things when I'm 80 or 70 or whatever. I want to write when I'm fire. Nothing should go away.
Yeah.
Yes, please, you can. I'm sorry if I took long.
No, don't be sorry.
I think every time I also hear you, I'm just like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious. My awareness and my journey in that way has been much longer, even though I'm younger than you, because I did not actually have any of those barriers. So in my community, it's privilege and power that are embedded in our social networks and into those expectations, and particularly as a woman in that community. It's the ways that you should behave. It's the ways that you are in a family, that you have to be in social gatherings. It's all of those expectations that are put on you. Because I'm Banya. We don't talk about caste. Why? Because in our groups, we are already in our group. We've already excluded people. So why would you talk about something that you are already equal in? So the conversation of caste doesn't happen. And so my journey in that way actually did involve, obviously, the norms in my family, but also traveling to India. Traveling to India, staying with my extended family, with my nani, with my dadi, and grandparents, and then learning, just observing what it was like in India first. And in India, it is obvious. It's so obvious because, as you said, you don't choose your profession. You are assigned it. You're designated to do this work. You are part of that functional pyramid. That's it. And it's so obvious there, and it's so striking when you see it, when you're not actually aware that this is what's happening. And when you become aware, you suddenly realize, what? I've been living in this the whole time. And for me, that's what the difference was. In traveling to India, seeing it and then coming back in my own social gatherings and then realizing, well, that's why we never talk about it. Because it's embedded already. If you are at that social gathering, you are part of the in-group. So the exclusions already happened. And that's deliberate because, like you said, it's about the matchmaking. So that's what the social gatherings are. It's like, these are the group of people that you want to then marry. These are the ones that you want to socialize with. So the social exclusion, I think, happens at an earlier, almost a different step here. And so that makes it seem like it's not here. It makes it invisible. It's deliberate. So that extra effort has to be put in. And those are the things that people with caste privilege can do in recognizing, in fact, it is here, and this is how it's operating. Because the first questions are, oh, where are you from? What is your name? Where are you from? Where are you working? Right? So it's caste, but then it's also class. So it's embedded already in getting a note to go to that gathering. So it doesn't happen immediately. And there aren't as many of these. You won't have this conversation in a mandir. You will not have it at all. It doesn't happen. And you won't have it in schools because who's talking about it? When it's dominated by folks who have that privilege, they're not going to raise it. So it could be, and these are the same things that I've also lived in family. The expectations, especially as a woman, will be, well, you know, you're doing the PhD for a hobby, right? Like, who does a PhD for a hobby?
It's for the matrimonial.
Yes,
for the matrimonial.
No, but that puts you down, though.
Too smart.
Too smart.
She got too educated.
No, but this is the thing, though. Think about the person who's actually saying this. What makes you think that somebody would spend their time in school to do a PhD as a hobby? So it's a way of actually saying that this is what's expected of you. You are not actually expected to do anything by studying, right? So it's to keep women in check within particular rules of you should be marriageable and you don't need a PhD for that.
Why do we keep spinning back to marriage and like matchmaking? But I know, 100%.
Yeah, it's
intricate.
entirely part of having the rules on women to not go outside of those caste groups.
And just a side note, when we were doing our exhibit paneling, the caste cross lovers was something that like I was like adamantly has to be a part of this story, because stories of love and like relationships often get sidelined, even though they are actually at the very core of how caste-based discrimination operates, especially in the diaspora here. The managing of relationships and dating and like marriage is siphoned through, marriage. So what I've witnessed here anyways in the diaspora. I do want to jump on to the next question. And just because I do want to give time for audience Q&A, if we can try to keep the answers a little bit short. We've got 2 more questions left. And then if you have questions, there is going to be a mic going around. Please do ask questions of our panelists. So my second question is about barriers in our society that prevent us from being able to discuss what happens openly in, we can say, Punjabi, Hindu, Sikh, South Asian, whatever spaces you want to say that, is under the umbrella of South Asia, perhaps. What are those barriers? So what or who do you think are some of the biggest barriers in moving the conversation forward towards change, or, what Dr. Jangam referred to as the future we'd like to build? What are those barriers? I'll start with Dr. Jangam, please.
Yes, thank you again. And I think one of the important things, like Sharan said, why are we going back every time to marriage? And the reason why we go back to marriage, because control over women's sexuality and reproduction is central to the idea of caste purity.
Yep.
Unless, you have that purity, you cannot claim the superiority. So therefore, the caste privilege thrives on control over women's sexuality. And in that context, I think, like one of the important barrier is marriage. Like, especially, the second, third generation women, if they want to step outside the caste norms and marry someone, outside the caste, one of the important thing is that, parents, relatives, everyone will frown upon you. So that, why are you going down the ladder, or, why are you stepping outside the norm? So I think the very idea that, the way in which caste gets erased has a lot to do with power and privilege, and also, caste comes with a lot of, other, related power. Like power and privilege are very important part of life, because caste opens doors for people. Like, that's why, the way in which, recruitments happen, the way in which people are, taken into different circles. That's why, as long as caste is attached to power and also privileges, caste exists, because that's how people, communities tries to thrive. And I think, the only way, we can talk, challenge caste is by talking about it openly. And that's why it's very important that education. And we have to educate and, talk about it openly, and, the stigma, we can only end caste stigma by talking it more openly. And, birth, none of us chose where we were born, right? And birth into a caste is not a crime. What is crime? Using caste as a way to oppress others is a crime. So that's why it's very important that these things, particularly people talk about it openly, write about it openly, and discuss.
Thank you. Neha, barriers that prevent us.
I will take a leaf from what Dr. Jangam has already said and keep it a little bit brief, but it's that unexamined privilege and the silence. That is the biggest barrier in our communities. That somehow if you say something, you're letting the cat out of the bag, and now you no longer have that privilege. Well, that's exactly it. When you name it, you can see this is how you are privileged. You are in that privileged position, how you are using that power. So asking those questions, wanting to learn about our heritage, about caste, and other things that we don't talk about, without fear of judgment, without any fear of retribution, those are the kinds of spaces we need. Because the pushback, like you said, is immediate from those who do have privilege. Because it's suddenly saying, but look, you cannot speak for everybody. You are not in the same position as me. So the pushback is immediate. And I know that several of you have already felt this. So this is exactly it. Having that place to examine this is the only way that you can go through it, to dismantle it.
So I think there's a number of different barriers. I think, say, coming from the Dalit space, even being born and raised here, there's a certain shame. Like it is actually shame that in society that you have with being a Dalit, which is ingrained from you. Like once again, it's a taboo word, right? Because once again, the caste system is based on exclusion, based on purity, right? So to actually come out and outwardly say that you come from a Dalit background, that you are a Dalit, takes a lot, right? And I mean, even in my own family, right? It's like, they're like, this whole, we don't believe in caste. It's like the same thing as, okay, you don't believe in caste, that's fine, but caste exists. It's the same thing as saying, oh yeah, I don't see color. We all know how problematic that is, right? So there's a shame with that, and that's a huge barrier to actually get over. And then in order to mobilize people to go out there, the words, the tools, the resources on even how to talk about it, right? So for me to come and talk to a group of people who say don't come from my community, therefore don't understand caste. You're like, what? Isn't this a Hindu thing that it was not existent anymore? Because, well, yoga and, meditation now, right? Because India is the place of peace. Yeah, no, right? Or within, and so that's one thing is we don't have the tools or the words, right? And then another thing I think is within Sikh spaces, being a Punjabi Sikh, I mean, Sikhi does not believe in caste, right? Like one of the foundational things about that is like an anti-caste caste abolition. So they're like, oh, we don't believe in caste. No, everybody is equal, right? But then you have all these, Jat Sikhs looking for a Jat Sikh wife for their son, once again back to marriage, or you have different gurdwaras, right? Or you have, and there is, like, there is still practices within the community which is not rooted in the religion, but it's these Brahmanical traditions that continue. And so when you go in, so kind of like what Neha was talking about, you have people within the community then that fight back with you and say, why are you being anti-Sikh? Right? Why, especially right now with the current environment that's happening in Canada against Sikhs as it is, right? So even last year when we launched Overcast, that was a lot of like, is this the right time to talk about this? Because, we have the international inquiry that's happening. We have Bhai Hardeep Singh was just killed in Surrey, right? Everybody is being called a terrorist or a Khalistani. Now, why are you making us look bad about talking about caste? And I was like, yo, dude, it's been 3,500 years. If it ain't now, when is it going to be? Right? So there's lots of barriers, and they continue. And a lot of time it's like the current conditions that are happening in our community not wanting to lose their privilege, right? Because once again, even though they might be the nicest people, it's going to take away some of their privilege. Right. So
I'm going to ask you to hold on to the mic because you've got the last question, and then I'll pass it to the other. So the last question is just about looking forward and hope. Because we don't want to end on a note of negativity. We want to end on a note of positivity and hope. And I think part of Dr. Jangam's talk did talk about the change you've seen as well, I think. Not change, but also good changes taking place in academic spaces. But Anita, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about where you see hope. What is the ideal kind of maybe future of the Overcast exhibit, or just anything you'd like to talk about things we can look forward to in these conversations?
Okay, so I love this question. I kind of influenced it.
Yeah. Because I was being all negative.
I was like, we can't end off on that. I see hope everywhere, right? And honestly, if we didn't, I wouldn't be doing this work, right? Like, I see hope in our team, right? My team is full of young people of very different caste backgrounds, very different genders, and we are all doing this work together, right? And I support them, they support me, we support each other. And I see this is hope for me, because we're planting these little, the seeds which are helping you understand what that struggle is. And so next time anything around caste comes up, you have something there that you can kind of grab onto. And I see hope in the fact that we created this exhibit and that it's getting appreciated. And even at times, like at the same time, we are getting pushback. Like there's like constantly this really bad person who keeps pushing back. But we have, and it takes a lot of labor and it's really hard. And we have to quiet each other down quite a bit but we keep going forward and being successful. We keep finding different ways to work. I find hope in the fact that you have two Dalit people who come from very different backgrounds, right? Who you would never have thought would be having this conversation. I worked alongside these two very powerful women in this. And so, and I see hope in the fact that I've got nieces and nephews out there who, my sisters are made into intercaste marriages, and these kids, we celebrate both sides. My little niece was running around watering plants, and she got mad when I told her to stop, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's her Jat background, right? That's the farmer in her. The other one loves shoes. So chamars are shoemakers, or they work with leather. I'm like, oh yeah, that one, she comes from our side, right? But we openly, we're celebrating our heritage with them, right? And where they came from, what they did. It might not be politically correct, but I'm okay with that.
Love it.
So I see hope in everything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's exactly it. Holding space for conversations like this. Encouraging youth, young professionals.
Encouraging you. I'm like, thank you.
Yes. You're still, don't be like that. To be together, to listen, to talk about their experiences. That's what gives me hope. And then breaking the silence, and exhibitions like this, that's what it does. It shows this is what we mean. This is what it sounds like. This is what the form is. That gives me hope that we can actually live those lives of respect, of equality, of justice.
Yes, thank you. And you really instilled a spirit of hope in me. And that's what, like, as I said, I see a lot of young generation, particularly second, third generation youth, and also many, even outside academia, people are interested in hearing about the stories and talking about it. And second thing is, collaborations. Like, for example, I was just telling that, I collaborated with a colleague who is a caste privileged Brahmin to do a survey on caste in Canada. And like, I see a lot of hope in terms of, openness to talk about caste in university spaces. And, particularly caste privileged people are looking at their own caste privilege and trying to interrogate, like, sitting with Neha itself is a very important conversation. Like, talking openly about caste. And these days I sit on lots of committees of students and who are, openly talking about their families, like dinner table conversations, where, when they're having conversations at home and when their parents are talking badly about other people, particularly people coming from lower caste backgrounds, and pointing to them that is wrong. And, then telling the caste privilege, how they are here and why they are here. And I think this is what is important, that second generation and education. Like these days, lots of interesting research going on in university spaces, and where, we are now, suddenly, caste has become a very important, and you cannot do South Asian academia without talking about caste these days. And that's why, everything is opening up, and youth particularly are, hunger to know about their own histories, hunger to know about where they come from. And I think this is what the way in which the world is connected. One of the important thing, at one level we are having this right-wing regimes everywhere trying to, suppress and do things, but there is this, oppressed community people who are talking about and connecting with each other. Suddenly you see that, indigenous youth and Dalit youth and Sikh youth and, Muslims. For example, I work with a lot of Muslim community members in Ontario. So we have fascinating collaborations, and I go to different labor movements. Like, one of the ways in which we are able to tap into, like, labor unions, and they're very open to, the caste privilege question. And in fact, it is labor union leaders who basically helped me draft various letters. So in this context, I think, there is a lot of hope in terms of, because, everyone is feeling the, pinch of privileged people, what they are doing. You look at Elon Musk and Trump, what they are here to destroy the world. And, the only way we can save ourselves is being together and listening to each other and talking about openly. And looking at our own privilege is very, very important.
Thank you. With that, if we could give a round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much. I imagine and I hope that people have questions that they would like to ask from any three of our panelists. Manmeet, do you want me to pass the mic around, or you're okay? You're okay? Okay. If you have a question you would like to ask, please do raise your hand, and then Manmeet will come with the mic. Don't all jump all at once. Oh, yes.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to, wow, this is loud. I just want to thank you guys for speaking up about Raza, because that was so refreshing. And I really appreciate calling it as it is. And I didn't expect it, to be honest. And so thank you for calling it what it is. Secondly, I'm curious about I know somebody had mentioned the pushback. And I know this is very real. I'm curious about how you guys managed that pushback. I understand this is the first event of its kind, which is amazing. And it's a first step to change, I think, and hopefully, bringing in other opportunities. But to do something like this in an educational space where there is definitely, difficulty and challenges, I'm curious about that pushback and the tools or the channels, or what you kind of went to make this possible.
I'm wondering if Neha can speak in terms of the tools, and then Anita, we could talk about the challenges in detail.
Thank you for that question. I think some of the tools that they're emotional first, of recognizing that when you have that pushback, it actually does hurt. It really hurts. So making time for each of us to recognize what that impact is, I think has actually been the first and foremost tool. And then there's, the university. The university is there. So there has been support within the university to do this, and that's why I started the introduction recognizing that we did get funding from within the university to do this work. And that the university has stood up in order for us to actually hold our event in their space. So those are some of the tools, but I think that when it comes down to it, it's going to be the solidarity that you build across within the group and across in community that will actually move things forward.
You want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Are you scared if I go first? Because you go first. She always thinks I'm gonna say too much or let the kid, just go ahead, Anita.
I don't think she's going to say too much. I think, as Neha talked about, our emotional state in addressing and taking care of each other. So we got pushback on this right from when the exhibit opened. And there was a lot of learning because we made a few mistakes ourselves where we didn't do enough consulting within the space to make sure that this exhibit was inviting in and not pushing people out. Because once again, we're talking about a space which is sensitive, right? And especially when we talk about caste within 6 spaces, right? That's a really sensitive thing, and we have to position things in a very sensitive way without changing the narrative that these youth wanted to share through their storytelling, right? So it should not come at the expense of these young Dalit kids who were actually sharing these stories. So when it first came out, there were a few things that were challenged that when we then went back to people within the community who are Sikh scholars or who are more well-versed in Sikhian history, we made a few tweaks actually between this exhibit and what was exhibited initially. And nothing compromised the material. So that was one thing, is actually being so when critique comes, taking the critique and being humble in the critique, because once again, we're building this as we're going, right? So that being the first of its kind exhibit, there were things that we could have done better and we would do differently next time. And that is really consulting, getting more voices, especially from the community we're trying to invite in. But as it kept going, these voices that are against this exhibit aren't well-wishers. Right? They aren't actually people who are trying to make positive change. They're just trying to control the narrative. And they're trying to squash. And so, of course, pissed off. So there's internal conversations and major, but then how we actually go public about it is in a responsible way. Because they're also still part of our community. And so going against them publicly, takes away resources. And there's 5 of us working on this, on the side. So we don't have that many resources. But the public image is important because caste work doesn't get funding. Not really, right? So, now in this specific thing, and even before, all of a sudden people from the community start saying, oh, this is anti-Sikh, this is anti-Jat, this is promoting hate, this is actually this, and this. And we're like, okay, and people don't know, so now all of a sudden they just step back out of fear. And so there's a lot of educating and a lot of really community building where we need people standing up for the work. Right? And then once again, always just kind of trying to bring them in, even though we don't like them, and trying not to offend them, even though we don't like them, and really just wanting to put really mean posts about them, but we can't because that's not a responsible thing to do, and it doesn't look good. But yeah, it's really hard to be mature.
But also, just to add, both Neha and Chinnaiah mentioned the misogynistic elements within our community as well. My frustration with the pushback is also the intersection to the misogyny that I think we've been facing as two women who've been, Anita, who's been leading this work for much longer, but myself in just helping with this exhibit only. And so there are so many internal conversations we need to have as a community to chip away at, a place to get to where we can have a conversation, period. And so I think Anita has very eloquently said, what we need to do. But also we are very lucky that we are supported a lot by community, actually. Like, we've got a lot of great relationships at all different levels, that we have spheres of influence where I don't think we can be harmed. Like, I'll be very honest, people were claiming they were going to protest here, and people were claiming they're going to cancel our event. Nothing happened. And we knew deep down nothing was going to happen. But, the emotional labor that we've had to take on just to get to this point has been tough. And seeing even just those of you who came today and stuck through the conversation means a lot as well. And my ask to all of you again would be, please to take this exhibit into your spaces. Think about where we can travel it. That would be our little act of revenge, I would say, against the people who are trying to stop it. Like, listen, I say pettiness is life. Pettiness is important. And I think we got to be a little bit petty. But yeah, I hope that helps kind of clarify what's been happening and how we've been dealing with it.
Building strong circles around you as you do the work is the most important thing. So, like, once again, if we didn't have the people around us to support us in this, it wouldn't, because there is so much hurt. Like, when somebody pushes back at you and you're already working from this place of, like, deficit, I guess, almost, like, it hurts and it's hard. And then your family's also like, why are you wasting your life on this? Right? Just like, you have so much privilege, right? Once again, we do have a lot of privilege. Like, why are you doing this? You could, it's a nice sunny day to be at the beach, right? Or you could be, like, looking for a husband. Like, something that's gonna make them happy, right? And instead, like, I'm sitting there airing dirty laundry and, like, everything. It doesn't. So really, and also wellness, like taking a breather, right? Like stepping back and being like, this work is important, and it needs to be done, but it can't be done at the cost of you, right? So you have to be well enough to be able to do it. I think that's.
I'm wondering, Dr. Jangam, if I'm sure you have faced pushback in the work you do, and how you deal with it.
Yeah, that pushback is, that's what I said, caste is something, you face. And even when we are doing this anti-caste work in TDSB and also the human rights, anti-human rights initiative, everything, pushback is so strong that, it came to such a situation that, all these Hindutva groups are sending letters to my president, provost, even to my colleagues, saying that, how I am anti-national, how I am against, In fact, one elderly guy sent a letter to my president saying that, my Canadian taxpayer money is being funded to this, lower caste person who came here and eating all those things. So pushback is always there, and one thing is that pushback tells you that you are succeeding. Like, a pushback comes because they are threatened by you.
Yeah.
They never imagine, 10 years, 15 years back, they never thought Dalit will be a professor in Carleton. I am here. They can't do anything. That's a problem. They know they can't touch me. And that's the reason they're frustrated. And that's why, it's very important that, in fact, that's what my resolve, that, every time I push back, one of the things, it's also, as Anita is saying, my wife, my son, they take most of the, most of the negative heat of it. Like, it came to such a situation that, various agencies, visited me and all those things. So then my son, very young person, why these people are coming, what a crime have you committed, all those things. So it is very hard on my family, but, at other level, it is the family again, they know that, why I do this, why I'm passionate about it. Because, the only way I'm trying to give back to my community is by doing what I'm doing. I can pretend, because I'm a privileged professor in first world, I can write on Gandhi and make my career if I want to, right? How great, that's what I can write about Gandhi. And there are lots of people, where, you all these, again, these people can invite you and make you do all sorts of things. But I don't want to do that. Like, because I know that, I am here precisely because, my ancestors have sacrificed. And, there is no way I can go back and do something to them. But the only way I can move forward is taking the memory forward and, take forward the anti-caste message and to build a better world. And another important thing, that anti-caste message is not against any person or any caste. It is to build a humanity together. What are we asking? Are we asking to give their properties? We are not asking them to buy cars to us. We are just asking us to be recognized as fellow human beings. There should not be any barrier. There should not be any sort of discrimination. We want to be like you. You like, this is the fundamental thing. Challenging privilege. They lose nothing by being, treating us equals, right? None of them, we don't ask any money or anything. So therefore, I know that what I am doing is ethically right. So therefore, whatever the pushback comes, I see, I see that as a, mission in which I am succeeding. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one question, if there is one more question, and then that'll be it for the evening. Any last burning questions? Yeah, please.
Hello. So I am curious about music and how casteism plays into music. As I read over there, especially in Punjabi music, I'm a big fan of Punjabi music. I can think of a few names in 1980s and 1990s of famous Punjabi singers who are not Jat. So right now I can't really think of any like super popular, like one of the mainstream Punjabi artists who are not really Jat, I would say. So yeah, that's another thing. There's the term like being Jat is it's so popular in the entirety of Punjabi music. So I wonder if there was a shift somewhere between from 1980s to now in terms of just the popularity. Was that like how music was viewed in like Punjabi culture? And another thing is because I'm not super sure about the music all over India. Is there? I'm not sure how casteism shows up in music over India, but I'm pretty sure like in terms of Punjabi music, there's this Jat thing in it. But is there also the same sort of things that happen in other like places in India in terms of music?
Anita, do you want to take that on first?
I'm thinking. Okay, so the question about the shift in culture within, I'll talk about Punjabi music, from the 80s and 90s to now, the increase in it being Jat-centric, right? That's kind of like what so I think like we've talked about this before too, and once again, I'm a huge fan of Punjabi music.
Yeah.
Like we are.
100%.
Yeah. 100% Punjabi music plays. And I think in the 80s and 90s, like, in a song you'd have like, Jat come up like once or twice maybe in, in a song, maybe once in a song, or like it was less prominent for sure. And whereas now I think like 90% of the music probably has like Jat mentioned somewhere. And why was there an increase in this? And what is the cultural increase in it? Like, I don't know. I think a lot of it probably was influenced from the West. Right? I think like out here where in the UK when the music blew up, but then when it blew up in Surrey, right? And it blew up in a very like, Jat-centric sort of space, and that influenced what was happening in Punjab, right? Like I felt like 90s UK music that was coming out wasn't so Jat to Jat to Jat, right? Whereas like now, like music after that, and maybe that's the reason. But Jat, like the caste has always been prominent. Like if you look at like the movies that were from the 80s, 90s, the Jat was in almost every title.
But also in Punjabi music, like when you talk about the 80s and 90s, there was an erasure, like you were saying. Surinder Shinda wasn't Jat. Kalerkant isn't Jat.
I don't think like a large percentage
Yeah.
of the Punjabi singers are actually Jat.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
sing about Jat. I mean, Yamla Jat wasn't Jat,
Exactly.
right? And his grandson now, right? Like Vijay, like he even like they sing Jat songs because that's what's culturally that's what we accept. I don't think it's the singer's fault. Like I don't think it's the musicians. They're feeding what the community wants and what the community is asking for and what the community is like, rocking out to. Not rocking out, bhangra paying, like.
But at the same time, I think there is a danger in not acknowledging like the bravado of the Jat identity in relationship to caste privilege. Like I think that part of the debates that are happening in our community spaces is that there's nothing shameful in declaring your Jat identity. Jat means clan or Jat means this and that. Fine, fair enough, but understand that this entire cultural ethos, including Punjabi and movies and other things, is perpetuating like violence, right? It's perpetuating privilege based on being a farming class, which you were given by a colonial British government. It's perpetuated by all these things that has given you, it's perpetuated by the fact that the Dalits are the ones working on your farms. When the farmers' protest was happening, it was Kisan Ekta Majdoor Jindabad. Majdoor were the ones who were working on the farms that give you the privilege, Jats, right? So like there's an entire like lack of acknowledgement of the privilege that takes place. But we can still like the music, which we do. But it's like you have to acknowledge the privilege contained.
And we understand that it's problematic, right? Because once again, the perpetuation of that same sort of that system, and it's actually just getting worse.
Yeah.
Right. So where okay, fine, we like the music, but like no, we have to change community where that's not acceptable anymore. Like so, I'm gonna say like in a white community, it's not gonna be acceptable for somebody to be coming in and talking about white power. Right? And that's kind of like through this conversation where we need to get to where it's not cool to be sitting there and being so like hyper Jat all the time and everywhere, right? Because what that means is but I'm not sure about in other communities within.
Yeah, I come from Telugu background, and Telugu film industry again, very casteist industry, and very feudal and casteist, and also misogynist, and also color conscious. And that's why in Telugu film industry, you always see Punjabi girls as heroines. Because they're fair and good looking and whatever the...
Well, air quotes and good looking.
So whatever, but thing is that that's what the whole obsession is that, most of the Telugu film heroines are North Indians. And and also it's very feudal. It's dominated by, entire film industry dominated by 5 families. Wow. Their children, their grandchildren, it's like comes from entire this thing. Like, you talk about this Pushpa, you might be seeing. Pushpa's grandfather was a it like a Chiranjeevi. Like you see that and that families are also 2 castes only again. 2 or 3 castes dominate. And but interestingly, the popular music is dominated by Dalits. Like entire revolutionary, songs or any sort of popular public movements, everything. Even now today, if you really want to organize anything, and without Dalit song, you can't have any protest movement. Wow. And it's like Dalits have taken over completely. Like also literature, for example, Telugu literature. It's all Dalits who dominate. It's very interesting how the privileged caste, feudal caste operate is very different, because it's for them it's about caste privilege and the money. Telugu film industry is it's about money. And but interestingly, if you look at southern, particularly Tamil cinema, Dalits are a very important force. Like Sharanjit, you might be knowing, who makes these anti-caste films. And also in Kannada, for example, you have this parallel cinema which actually exhibits, dominated by the Dalits who are challenging the caste privilege and bringing caste question into the mainstream. So it's very interesting, because what happens is that in South India, particularly after 1970s, when the Green Revolution has happened, the agriculture capital was turned into cinema capital. So it is this feudal caste basically who made lot of money in Green Revolution time. Unlike in Punjab, they invested in cinema theatre. So that's why they are the one making cinemas, and particularly they started building cinema theatres in villages. And therefore you have this very interesting hierarchy. The exhibitors and also the main producers of the films are dominant feudal caste, and the audience are always lower caste.
Do you want to add anything?
Sure, Bollywood.
Yeah.
That's the cultural export. शादी करोगे मेरे से शादी करोगे. So that's the cultural export.
And on that note, we are out of time, and I just want to acknowledge all of you who came, stayed for the conversation. Thank you to the entire team, and thank you to Neha for being our supporter here at UBC Okanagan. Dr. Jangam, thank you so much for your brilliance and for your words and your stories. Thank you, Anita, for just being you. Please do speak to our panelists outside of the conversation here, but there are still sandwiches left over. Take them home. There's a lot left over. Take some matiai home. And please spread the word about Overcast. Bring it to your spaces. And please, if you do have time, you can scan the QR code to do the survey. Feedback about the event and also your thoughts about the creation of a South Asian Canadian Museum here in British Columbia, a promise made by the province 4 years ago. Still yet to happen. But we'd love to hear your thoughts about what you'd like to see if this thing ever comes to be, but also about our event. Things we maybe could have done better, things you'd like to see next time. As part of our CUES grant, we do have events planned throughout the entire year, I think up until August. So if you have ideas of maybe panel conversations you'd like to see next or what you'd like to see happen, definitely let us know. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Thank you so much.